the public until the time of their enunciation of their imamat came true, because their life would be in danger. The Khulafa would try to execute, to assassinate the Imam before his time. They tried to finish the lineage of the Imam. So every Imam hid the next Imam until the time came for his enunciation. Then it was revealed that where the Imamat would go. Remember our sixth Imam, at the time of his Shahadat, he listed five people, four or five people. He listed Haru, he listed the governor of Medina, he listed this Abdullah that we said couldn't be the Imam, he listed Imam Musa Jafar, and he listed the mother of Imam Musa Jafar as the next Imam, and led society into confusion because it was in. But in the case of Imam Rada and Imam Jawad, Imam Rada started announcing from the age of 4, 3, sending his companions to ask Imam Jawad their questions, to teach them where Imamat was going. One of the characteristics of Imam al-Jawad, right? We said that he began his Imamat at the age of 9. His Imamat lasts for a period of 16 years. He becomes Shaheed at the age of 25. He is known as Shabab al-Aimma, the young man of the Aimma, who they cut down in the youth, in the prime of his youth. But this 25-year-old, before his Shahadat, there are over 200 prominent scholars of Islam that studied under Imam al-Jawad, including personalities who are lofty, elderly gentlemen, who Bazanti, Ali ibn Yaqteen, Hassan and Hussein al-Ahwazi. Hassan and Hussein Ahwazi were companions of their father Imam Rada and were companions of Imam al-Hadi, and they're known as students of Imam al-Jawad. They were old men at this time. The fact that they had to turn to a young man, and they had to go to this young man who was in his teens, who was in 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old, a teenager, a 20-year-old, and these old men with their white beards were studying with their heads bowed in front of the Imam and acknowledging that there is no greater authority of Allah on this earth than Imam al-Jawad, was one of the ways in which the Imam broke this bad mentality in society that if they are not elderly and respectable and their beards are not giant and white, then they have nothing in benefit to teach us. It was one of the important prospects that the Imam was educating, that where Allah's authority and knowledge exists, don't look at what it looks like from outside, look at the content of the speech. Which reminds us the statement of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Don't look at who is speaking, but rather look at what is being said. Which was the statement of Amir al-Mu'mineen himself, that when the people had been poisoned against the family of Ahlul Bayt, when the people of Sham refused to acknowledge, and whenever they saw something of Ali ibn Abi Talib, they refused it. It was Amir al-Mu'mineen himself who made the claim. He said, "Oh people, look at what I'm saying. If you can't stand to look at me, at least acknowledge the truth of my words." Imam al-Jawad was the definition of this process. He was the one who educated society on this and broke this norm because they had no choice. Allah sequestered the knowledge of A'imma and the guidance of humanity into a person that people had a hard time accepting that we have no choice but to go to him. And it still happens today. It still happens today. A young man comes in clerical robes after spending years of study. What's this kid doing here? Go, go, go. Okay, you're wearing it for fun, huh? What is this? Look at the content. Look at the quality. Look at the presentation and the pedigree. Imam Rada, to break these aspects, began at the age of 3 to refer to his son as Abu Ja'far. Abu Ja'far is a kunya, is a technonym, is the title that is given to a respected elder man who has children. Imam Rada, when he would write letters to his son from Tus, he would refer to him as Abu Ja'far. He told his companions, "Go ask Abu Ja'far," and they would say, "Who?" And he would say, "My son is Abu Ja'far." Imam Rada did this for two reasons. One, as a teaching of character. You want your children to be noble, you want your children to be upright, you want your children to be responsible, treat them with respect. and two, as a bayan of aqa'id, to show that though you may look at this young boy and see a child, don't you dare give him nicknames. Don't you dare treat him lightly. I, the Imam, am educating you of the status of this as your next Imam. This dawr of Imam al-Jawad is something unique in history. One of the fundamentals that proved this to humanity and society when they doubted the status of Imam al-Jawad is the third point that we take a look and we see. The absolute nature of the knowledge of an Imam. Ma'mun, Mal'un, upon the shahadat of Imam Rada, decided somehow to win over this young boy and bring him into his fold. Ma'mun had tried to tie his name to the name of Ahlul Bayt and take control of the authority of Ahlul Bayt by taking Imam Rada and making him Naib Khalifa, making him the successor of the Khalifa. What he found was, if I make one of the Ahlul Bayt my Naib Khalifa, society will overthrow me and prefer them to me. So he says, okay, that's not going to work. So when he sees that the next Imam is a young man, that is Imam al-Jawad, he makes the decision, he says, let me win him over to myself. And he tries through gifts, and then after gifts at the age of 12, he tries through marriage. And he plans and he says, I will marry my daughter Fadil to this Imam. Now the Banu Abbas, who were the supporters of the Khalifa, they were the owners of the Khilafah, they were the Banu Abbas. They were the dynasty of the Banu Abbas, the Abbasid dynasty. They took issue with this. They said, this young boy, you're going to marry your daughter, entire lineage to him. How can you do that when there are more older, more mature, more suitable people that you should tie your lineage to and bring them to this place? So, Ma'mun said, okay, why don't you come and see what the Imam possesses and then tell me if I'm wrong in my decision? So famously, he sets a munazira in his court and brings the most senior cleric in the religion of Islam, Yahya bin Akhtar, to question Imam al-Jawad. Now, this story of the questioning of Imam al-Jawad is very famous. Why? We say that Yahya bin Akhtam sat in a court, and Imam Jawad, as a young man of 12, sat in the court, and Yahya bin Akhtam, the most senior, big white beard cleric of the time, the leader of all of the judiciary system of the entire Islamic Khilafat, sat there, and he says, shall I ask or you shall ask? And Imam Jawad says, go ahead and ask. And he says, what's the kafara for one who kills an animal in the state of ihram? You see, what's interesting is the question. Let me explain. You guys are okay? I haven't put anyone to sleep yet, right? All right. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In the time of Harun, the academic system that was tied to the Hanafi school of thought became the dominant ideology and teaching method of the time, which include a system called fiqh al-fardiyya. Fiqh al-fardiyya, to put it simply, was the concept of asking the hypothetical question. What this school of thought, as it became the main jurisprudential system of the courts of the Khalifa, to test each other and to see who was the most knowledgeable scholar and who deserved to have the position of authority amongst themselves, would ask a hypothetical question. It wasn't necessarily that the question was relevant or that there was a problem associated with it. The significance of the hypothetical question, as we understand today, is, for example, the idea of a practical. That's okay, you memorized all these books, can you apply them? So they started this concept of fiqh al-fardiyya, and they used it within themselves to kind of figure out who knew the most and could apply the most and come up with the best derivations and conclusions, and they could do all these different things. And Yahya bin Akhtam, being the leader of the court, the leader of this ideology, began his questioning of Imam al-Jawad with this question of fiqh al-fardiyya, of the hypothetical, to see in this hypothetical what this young man knew and didn't know. The interesting thing is not only did he pick a hypothetical question, in his mind he picked one of the most difficult hypothetical questions of the time. Shlon, lesh? Because you see, the discussion of Hajj is a discussion that its laws and rules and regulations are not detailed in the Quran. To know the details of the Hajj and the ahkam of Hajj, you have to know hadith. And you have to know depth and dearth of hadith. They're not common hadith that everybody knows that explain to you the ahkam of kafara if you happen to be in a state of ihram. Yahya bin Akhtam's question was not to be taken lightly. Yahya bin Akhdam's question was designed to be dangerous. This wasn't a fool. He had taken the ideology of the time that was at its peak, that was used in the entire judiciary system to determine the ranks of scholars, and him being the peak of it, the leader of it, turned and phrased a trick question that he knew had multiple facets, that they would see what's the depth of this boy. Na'uz billah, he thought a boy. Imam al-Jawad turns and he says, Yahya, your question is incomplete. Imam Jawad shows the superiority of the knowledge of Imam, that he takes the one hypothetical question that is asked by Yahya bin Akhtam and replies in turn with 18 to 20 hypothetical questions that detail far more precisely than the leader of the entire system of judiciary could come up with at that time. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Which is why, upon the reply of Imam al-Jawad, Yahya ibn Akhtam says, I got nothing. He says, this one is smarter than even me. Yahya ibn Akhtam doesn't even need to hear the answer. The fact that the Imam has the ability to take this one hypothetical and break it into these 18 to 20 branches, you did not specify, was it a bird? Was it large? Was it small? Was the man in a state of ihram? Was he inside the haram? Was he outside of the haram? Did he do it intentionally? Did he do it accidentally? Did he know the law? Did he not know the law? Was he in a state of hunting or was he not in a state of hunting? Was the act in self-defense? The Imam continues numbering through these questions, showing that, oh Yahya, the question is incomplete. If you wanted to ask me a hypothetical, you should have filled out the process of ensuring that you've picked all of the details and variables that need to be answered. That understanding of the entire concept was a demonstration that even the leader of the judiciary couldn't match the intellect of the Imam. And then the Imam proceeds further and he says, Yahya, now it's my turn to ask you a question. And he says to him, now look, this is where the beauty of the Imam's question comes. Right? The idea is the hypothetical. The idea is to demonstrate how many branches of knowledge you know. The Imam begins his question, Yahya, tell me about a situation where a man looks at a woman in the morning and she is halal for him. He looks at her before zawal, she is haram for him. He looks at her at zawal, she is haram for him. He looks at her after in the afternoon, she is haram for him. He looks at her at maghrib, she is halal for him. 7 times in the instance the condition changes between halal and haram, and Yahya bin Akhtam says, maybe I could have answered you one, but these 7 continuously, there's no way I can answer you. Meaning the perfection of the question of fiqh al-fardi was presented by the Imam himself to demonstrate the absolute nature of the knowledge the Imam possesses. These were techniques that were used to show that Allah's wilayah, Allah's authority, is not something that can be taken lightly. And the knowledge that Allah presents to His Imam is not something that is passed from one to another. That because Imam Jawad did not have enough time with Imam Rada, that he only spent 5 years with his father. A child at the age of 5 is not at the age of reading and learning, is not at the age of memorizing and understanding the details of fiqh. This was a proof to all of humanity that the appointment of an Imam is a divine affair, is not an affair dictated by men and books. Which is why it proved that it is Allah who dictates His authority, whether it is Isa alayhi salam who in the cradle says, وَجَعَلَنِي نَبِيًّا, or it is Zakariya's son Yahya who at the age of 5 and 6 becomes the Nabi of Allah, or it is Imam Jawad who at the age of 8 becomes the Imam, or Imam al-Hadi who becomes the Imam at the age of 10, or Imam al-Askari who becomes the Imam at the age of 20, or Imam Sahib al-Asri wal Zaman who becomes the Imam at the age of 5. You ready for some fadail? Now we understand that if the appointment of the Imam is not an affair that's dictated by humanity and society, if we understand that it is Allah who appoints and sets the appointment at its appropriate time, Now turn back and look at Dawat Dhul Ashira. That when Ali ibn Abi Talib is at the age of 9, and the family has been gathered, and the Prophet asks, who will be my supporter, who will be my helper, and not one hand is raised except for this boy of 9. When he tells him to sit down, he asks again, and no one raises their hand but this boy of 9. He tells him to sit down. When the third time it happens that Ali ibn Abi Talib rises and says, Ya Rasulullah, I am your helper, I am your supporter. And Rasulullah replies, هذا وسي هذا ولي هذا خليفتي هذا أخي هذا علي ibn Abi Talib كان وسي بعدي. اللهم صل على محمد. Ya Ali. The Prophet is not indicating that someday Ali ibn Abi Talib will become my wasi. The Prophet is not saying 20 years from now Ali will be my successor. The Prophet is saying this boy of 9 today is the successor of Nabuwwat. This boy today at the age of 9 is one who is capable of leading all of humanity after. I said there are fadail within this that if we were to understand them, that the dictation of Ali ibn Abi Talib as being the successor of Rasulullah did not happen in the field of Ghadir. His attribute of being the successor and being qualified for that successorship was tied to that day of Dhul Ashira when he was not more than a boy of 9 years of age. And that is the demonstration and the proof of the authority that we are certain that the statement of Rasulullah was not mubaligha. It was not exaggeration, because it was something that was proven to us by the fact that if Allah can make the Imam of the entire nation at the age of 8, then what is the problem with the successor of the Prophet being only the age of 9 when he is the successor of the Prophet? Shall we go one step further? One more. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For Allah, they say there are two types of sifat. Sifatul dhati, sifatul fi'li. Sifatul dhati are those qualities that Allah possesses, whether there was someone who existed to acknowledge them and understand them or not. Allahu al-Hayy. Allah is living. Allah has no place. Allah has no maqam. Whether He created something or not, we know that Allah possesses this quality. Sifat al-fi'li are those sifat that we recognize when Allah creates. For example, Allah is Rahman. Allah is Ghafoor. These qualities, if there was no subject who received this mercy of Allah, how would we know that Allah possesses this quality? This is one of the discussions that, for example, of how do we understand and analyze and learn about Allah. One of the important things that we need to do as human beings is spend the time through the door of the Ahlul Bayt and how they've educated us about Allah to return to those doors and learn about Allah. And one of the techniques that we use is we say that there are certain sifat that are tied to the essence of Allah in such a way that whether we existed or not, this attribute of Allah would be known. And then there are others that we knew about this attribute or we learned about this attribute because we were subject to this attribute. When we talk about the appointment of an Imam, and we talk about who it is that has the authority to appoint the Imam, the appointment of an Imam, we know, is not in the affairs or the hands of man. The appointment of the Imam or the Nabi is not in the hands of the Anbiya. We know that, for example, Imamat within itself is not an inherited trait. What that means to say, it's not the oldest son always, or it's not in a direct lineage that we see Imamat. Rather, Allah selects who the Imam is. It's not something an Imam inherits from another. The divine authority is not an inherited characteristic, rather it is an appointed characteristic from Allah. We know that no person can appoint this, no prophet can appoint this. It can't be given without the will of Allah in inheritance. But it's not something that Jibreel can appoint. It's not something that Mikael can appoint. It's not something that is written in the Lawh, that the Lawh decides what it is that exists as an Imam. We know That, for example, the appointment of the Imam is not something that can be influenced by heaven or hell. We know that the beings in heaven don't have any right in the say in the appointment of an Imam. Why? The A'imma alayhim salam are the ones who taught the beings in heaven how to worship Allah. The appointment of the Imam is greater than the appointment of heaven and hell. That the Imams from Ziyarat Jami al Kabir, we know that the Imams will be the ones who, on behalf of Allah, will be the ones who will give out heaven and hell to the people. So the Imam's authority exceeds even that of heaven and hell. The only one who has the authority for the appointment of an Imam, and that appointment exceeds anything else in creation, is that Allah Himself is the one who has the divine authority to appoint an Imam. And the affair of the appointment of the Imam is greater than anything that has been brought into existence. When we read, for example, in Hadith Kisa, إِنِّي مَا خَلَقْتُ سَمَاءً أَرْضًا, all of the things that Allah says, I did not create anything that exists except for these five. And it includes the Imams, all of the Imams. Is to say that the most important and significant item in creation that is tied only to Allah, and only Allah has the authority to do this, and only Allah has the right to make this, and He is the one who produces this, is the appointment of the Imam. Now this was a theory. Why? This was a theory. Because we could say this happened, but when we looked at history, we found that up until the ninth Imam, it was always the most mature, the most qualified, the most elder, the most appropriate individual who was given the mansab of Imamat and no one else. But this appointment of Muhammad ibn Ali al-Jawad at the age of 8, when in humanity there could have been many people who were believed by society to be more worthy of this attribute, was a demonstration of the sifat fi'liya, that no one and nothing in existence has the right to appoint an Imam other than Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. This appointment of Imam al-Jawad, when Imam Rada says there is nothing more mutabarrik in all that has been born and made than the birth of this Jawad, is because the appointment of this Imam is a demonstration of a sifat of Allah that you may have doubted if Allah had not shown it to you Himself. Meaning our depth and understanding of the relationship between Ahlul Bayt and Allah is perfected and completed by the appointment of one at the age of 8, which defined the logic of humanity but perfected the example of Allah in humanity. I went too far. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This is why the discussion, the presentation, the celebration of the Wiladat of Imam al-Jawad, that which proved what came before him and established that which came after him, that from the moment of the birth of Imam al-Jawad, there is no further split amongst the Ja'fari madhab, and the lovers of Ahlul Bayt have stayed together from Imam Rada's imamat until the day of Al-Qa'im, is established by this moment, and which is why it is a moment of great celebration for us. ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم. We raise our hands 10 times. Ya Allah, 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 Ya Allah. Ya Mahmud بحق محمد, Ya أعلى بحق علي, Ya فاطر السماوات بحق فاطمة, Ya محسن بحق الحسن, Ya قديم الأحسان بحق الحسين. Oh Allah, accept this small ibadah from us. Ya Allah, forgive our sins, cover our flaws. Oh Allah, keep us on the upright path of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Ya Allah, those amongst our families, our community, the mu'mineen who are sick and suffering through difficulty, Ya Allah, give shafa'at to the mu'mineen wherever they may be. Oh Allah, remove this waba from the mu'mineen, the muslimeen, and all the people of the world. Oh Allah, we have gathered with hajat. By the right of the mention of the one who is Jawad, fulfill our hajat. Ya Allah, our children, keep them on the upright path of Ali Muhammad. Give them the tawfiq to be upright examples like the example of Imam al-Jawad. Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us, our families, and our lineage from the upright supporters of Sahib al-Zaman. O Allah, entitle us to the Shifa of Abu Abdullah in dunya and in akhirah. Suratul Fatiha ma'as salawat.
أفضل السلام محمد وآل محمد محمد امام لہما جو پیدا ہوئے شہ ذوالقرم آج پیدا ہوئے نبی ولادت کی ہر سو ہے جو وہ عالی امم آج پیدا ہوئے امام لہم آج پیدا ہوئے شہ ذوالقرم پیدا ہوئے جو ہے جانشین امام رضا امام امم آج پیدا ہوئے محمد کہنا مصلی علی محمد سیوم آج پیدا ہوئے امام لہم آج پیدا ہوئے شہ ذوالقرم پیدا ہوئے امام محمد تقی بالتقی ہے وہی باکرم آج پیدا ہوئے خوشی ہے فلک پر ملک بھی بہم شہ محترم آج پیدا ہوئے امام لہم آج پیدا ہوئے شہ ذوالقرم پیدا ہوئے یا موسی کاظم ہمیں آفت سے چھڑاؤ بہر حسن حسین مصیبت سے چھڑاؤ پہلے ہے طلب اذن دخول موسی کاظم کرتے ہیں سلام کی جو قبول موسی کاظم مطلب میرا ہوئے حصول موسی کاظم نہ پھر نظر سے ملول موسی کاظم یا موسی کاظم ہمیں آفت سے چھڑاؤ نہ مصیبت سے چھڑاؤ ہوتی ہے ہر ایک صبح میری رنج و علم سے اور دن میرا گزرتا ہے بس ساری غم سے کچھ سوچتا نہیں ہے اس رنج و محن سے ہے کون سوا آپ پکاروں جسے دکھ میں یا موسی کاظم ہمیں چھڑاؤ بے حسن حسین مصیبت سے چھڑاؤ الہی بیمار داشت بلا جو بیمار ہو جلد پاوے شفا الہی برائے امام زمان ہمیں ہول میں شخص جیسوں امان قیامت کو معشور ہو علی اونچے خواب سے کہ ہم یا علی ہے پانچ والوں مل جا شان احمد والی زہرا وسان شبیر سے امام زمان شبیر سے امام زمان ایک ایک پہ صلوات پڑھو صلوات صلوات سخیور پہ نثار گو ہے جو نبی بلند صفات ہوئے صلوات صلوات و سلام یا امام زمان ظہور یا امام زمان صلوات اللہ الواحد المؤمن والمؤمنات صواب الفاتحة
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدتي نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين، وعلى 9 المأسومين من ذريتك علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان سيدي الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان، السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان، عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته.